Hi, I'm Caroline Mitchell, canine behaviourist at Good Doggy. So I often visit families where everybody in the family is doing a different thing when it comes to their dog's training. So maybe one member of the family doesn't experience the same problems as everybody else. Sometimes I have a dog walker or a dog sitter that is also doing their own thing. But what does this mean for your behaviour training? In this video, I'm going to talk about different ways of being consistent, when it matters and when it doesn't, and a few tips to get you all on the same page for those times that it does matter. So sometimes not everybody experiences the same problem with the dogs. And if this is the case for you, the good news is that not everybody has to do the same. This is the time when everybody doesn't have to be consistent. So the ones that are getting the behaviour that you want, they just get to carry on as they are. And the ones that are not getting the behaviour that you want, those are the ones that need to focus on the training. Only those ones. So the important thing here is that if this is you, if the dog is behaving differently for you and you see that that's a problem behavior, only you have to focus on the training. So maybe your dog is reactive for you, but not for the dog walker or for your husband. Or maybe you're working on recall and the dog will come back for everybody else, but not you. Maybe they jump all over your wife, but not you. Or perhaps they go to the groomers and they're fantastic, the groomer loves them, but you can't even get near them with a brush. So the most important thing is that the person who is affected by the unwanted behaviour, they are the only one that needs to be consistent, and they just be consistent within themselves. So once you've created a training plan, for example, if you're trying to get your dog to stop pulling on the lead, maybe your training plan says you should stop when the lead goes tight and the lead should loosen, then you start to move. So if that's your plan, as long as the person who is working on that, who has the tight lead problem, as long as they are consistent and stop every single time the lead goes tight and start every single time the lead goes loose, then the behavior will change for them and they'll catch up with everybody else. So your dog will have different expectations from different people. And once you've started your training plan with them, their expectations of you will change. So their actions will always have the same response with you. And you'll start to see that their behaviour will adjust with you or whoever it is that the behaviour is affected with. So we know that dogs can learn to behave differently for different people because he's already doing that. So we know that only one person has to work on this in this situation. Sometimes, though, everybody has the same problem, but they're all different things. So this makes things a little bit harder. So let's go back to the loose lead plan that we had earlier. The loose lead plan was stop when the lead goes tight and start when the lead goes loose. But if you're doing that, and meanwhile another person is yanking the dog back whenever they pull on the lead, and somebody else is letting the dog drag them for 10 paces and then shouts, "You're pulling," before stopping, or somebody else is doing something completely different, you will still get there, but you personally will have to be superhuman consistent. Because we do know dogs can learn different behaviours for different people, but it does help when everybody's doing the same thing because the dog knows what to expect from everybody. A dog will always do what serves them best though. So if they can get to their destination faster by pulling on the lead to get to the sniff, so maybe they pull their dog walker on their walks consistently all the time. But you're consistent with your training and your dog will soon learn that the fastest way to get to their sniffs is to walk calmly. He will eventually learn to do both. As I say, it's faster if everybody does the same thing, but if not, your dog will eventually learn just to be consistent with you. And when they know what to expect from you, they will change their behaviour just for you. And eventually you'll have a dog that walks nicely on the lead for you while everybody else is struggling and scratching their heads because they don't really know why. This is incidentally why send-away training doesn't work. Send-away training is where you pay somebody else to take your dog for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and they will train your dog for you and they return to you a dog that is fully trained. But unless you are going to retrain the dog, and I say retrain because, again, your dog's expectations of you are going to be different from what they were when they were at send-away training. So you do have to retrain the dog, but you'll have to use the exact same techniques that they used while the dog was with them. Often they won't be too honest about what these techniques are. Not always, of course, there are some that I'm sure are brilliant, but often the techniques are not terribly desirable. So they miss stuff out and therefore you won't be able to replicate the results that they had because you're not following the plan exactly the way that they did. Their training plans are not usually kind, and I've lost count of the number of dogs that I have seen that have been returned from this kind of training, they are nervous wrecks. They've lost loads of weight because they didn't eat properly. It was just a really stressful experience for them. So the knock-on effect of these kinds of training is that you're not going to be able to replicate that. And even if you could, you wouldn't. This is also the reason why I prefer not to do too much work on people's dogs for them. So when I'm in a consultation, I will much prefer to talk you through the techniques rather than do them myself. I'm happy to demonstrate techniques when I need to, but in the main, I'm getting you to do all of the work because I want you to have the results. I want you to be consistent. I want you to know that you can do it, and you're going to be doing exactly the training while I'm with you, as hopefully you'll be doing it after I've gone. So you'll be able to be very, very consistent. Dogs behave differently for different people. We know that. So there's no point in me trying it because even just me taking hold of a lead means the dog's response will be different. So it's much better to just do it yourself. But if everybody is doing different things, there are things you can do to speed up the training. So the first thing is that you can take on most of the work yourself. So if the dog is reactive on walks, then ask other people to completely avoid triggers. Get them to do all the easy walks. Let them go to the place where the triggers don't exist. Let them do all of their private field training and all that kind of stuff. And you focus heavily on working on the triggers. This means then that you'll be getting a lot of progress because if you can do 80% of the work perfectly, then you make progress. Let them not undo all your training. What often happens if you don't agree to take it all on by yourself is that another person will take your dog out. They let the dog react to everything. So they have 10 reactions to dogs. You're going to need to do at least 10 really good training moments in order to undo just those 10. And that's not even making progress. Having 50% reaction and 50% perfect training is still not going to make any progress. All you're going to do is stay where you are, and nothing's going to improve. So if they avoid triggers completely and let you handle all the triggers, then maybe they get caught out the odd time. But if they get once or twice every now and then, that's easily undone, but you have enough good training to actually move forward. Check out my video on the 80-20 rule where I talk about this in more specific detail. But basically, if you do 4 really good reactive encounters and only 1 bad one, then you will make fast progress. Anything closer to 50%, 60%, and you're starting to really lose your progress, you're working very hard for nothing. So you'll be going out doing all the work, somebody else will going out, taking your dog out, not caring, and undo everything you've just done, and you'll go nowhere. So if they can just avoid everything and let you do it all, you'll make the progress and you'll win in the end. But maybe there's some good reasons why people are not helping you out with the training. Training a dog to do new behaviors is not easy, and it does take a huge amount of patience. And if that case is the case, then again, if you temporarily do all of the hard work while they're avoiding the situation entirely, what you can do with your dog is you can teach them the new techniques, you can form a new habit with them while they're with you, and then once you've got them to a really good level, you can bring in the other members of the family. This happens a lot when, for example, barking problems can be really frustrating and difficult to ignore. You might get one member of the family that's really good at the training and another person that struggles with it because their patience levels aren't the same. So take them out of the equation, let somebody else establish the new behaviors, practice them with the dog. And then when the other person comes in, it's really just a top up. When you first start training, lots of stuff has to happen. First of all, you're learning, the dog's learning, and the new habit has not been formed yet. Your dog is still being drawn back to their old behavior because it served them so well up until now. They still want to do that. This is your training plan. This isn't their choice. They didn't decide one morning, oh, I should really try and stop barking. You decided that. So you're fighting against their will and instinct to do their old behavior. If you do all of the work and establish really good habits, you've eliminated nearly all of those factors. And now really it's just about that other member of your family learning the techniques that you've done and just applying them to them. So it's just passing the training on as opposed to teaching them from scratch, which is hard work and frustrating. So this can be a really good way of getting around any kind of training that is frustrating and needs a lot of patience. If you've got one person that's really good at it, let them handle it all entirely at the start. Once you've established new habits and new behaviors, then the other people can come in. It won't take nearly anywhere near as much patience in order for them to just roll the training out themselves. As long as they can copy you exactly, then the dog will very, very quickly realize that this is the same as what you've been doing, and they'll just adjust their behavior. So it's a fast track way for them, but it does mean a bit more extra work for you. So that's a good way to get around that. If you went to your send away trainer and followed their plan exactly, this is exactly what would happen for you as well. You would follow their plan. Your dog would just go, oh yes, I recognize all of this training, and would just fall in. So basically it's that kind of principle. So also let's talk about words and tools, because these are things that people often argue about as well, because they're all doing different things. Using the same tools can also help, but only if they're being used in the same way. So I remember a family that introduced a clicker to their dog, and they were using it for sit-stay training, anxiety, and recall primarily. The clicker should not be used as a cue for a new behavior. So what I mean by this is that if your dog is already doing a behavior that you don't want, don't try and press the clicker thinking you're going to change them to do something else. The clicker rewards the behavior they're doing at the time you press it. So if your dog is barking at a window and you press the clicker, your dog might stop barking and come to you to get a treat. But what happened is that you rewarded them for barking, then you offered them a treat. You promised them a treat with the clicker. So they went, oh, I'm going to go and get my treat, and they'll probably just go back to barking. But next time the situation happens, they will bark again, and the following time they will bark again, because the clicker rewards them for that response. So your actual long-term barking is never going to change. In that moment, it might feel like the clicker has actually done something for you, but that's not how it should be used. The clicker should be used as a reward. It should be clicked only when a dog is doing the thing you want them to do already. So we were going to use the clicker in this situation for calm responses, and for following those cues that we had requested. The dog walker changed it and used it as a way to recall the dog. So when the dog was running off into the distance, they would press the clicker in order to try and get the dog to run back to them to get the treat. And this was happening for them really, really well. But what it did for us was made it useless in all of our training, because when we want a dog to do a sit-stay, we certainly don't want them to hear the clicker and come running to us. The clicker should be a reward for staying. And it should encourage them to keep going until they've had their treat. The treat should be the bit that releases them from their sit-stay. But what was happening for us is we were getting our dog to sit and stay. As soon as we pressed the clicker, he would follow us to come and get his reward. So undone all of that. When we were trying to get them to be calm and not anxious in public, every time you clicked it, he would come over for a treat. What we wanted him to do was to be present in a situation. So if you're going to use tools, keep them just to the people that know how to use them well. For us, the dog walker would have been better off not helping us at all, because all it did was just ruin all of the training that we were doing with our clicker. Tools can be useful, though, to help a dog distinguish between things that they're expected to do. For example, guide dogs are taught to behave differently when they're in their working harness compared to when they're just on a lead and collar. When they have their working harness on, they know that they have to be very alert and aware. They have to do all the training that they've been taught. They have to guide their person, look after them. But when they're not on their harness, then they have a lot more freedom. They can relax and play and do other things. So they know the difference between being on a harness and being on a collar. This can work for you as well. So, for example, when I start doing loose lead training, you could use a different harness for when they're on the loose lead, and a collar maybe for when they're on the long lead, or the other way around. Maybe you have a very short lead for loose lead training, and they get to go out on a big long line when you want them to have a bit more freedom. So they start to learn the difference that, holding the lead in a certain way and attaching it in a certain way to their harness or collar means one thing. Changing the way that's all set up means something very different. So this can help you get over those early stages as well, whenever you just want to do a small amount of loose lead training, but it's frustrating and time consuming, and you still want to go somewhere. So you can just switch from one to the other so your dog knows what's expected. Eventually, you'll just use all of your loose leads set up in all of their walk, and they'll just walk beside you the whole time. But until they really know how to do it, then this is a good way of you getting through that early stage of training and still achieving a good walk. But again, it just shows that you don't even have to be consistent within yourself, that the equipment has now become the cue for your dog. The dog knows that when he's wearing this, he does this, and when he's wearing that, he does that. So that means you can vary the kinds of walks that you have with your dog, and that inconsistency stops to matter. Using something like a clicker or a treat bag is also another way of evening out inconsistent approaches. When the dog sees the clicker come out, or he sees that the the treat bag has gone on. He knows he's in training mode. His expectation is going to be that he's going to earn treats. So naturally, he's looking for ways to earn those. So things like that can be really good for helping a dog to come more in tune with you and more kind of into your training. I also mentioned words and cues. It's best not to place too much emphasis on the words and cues that you use. In fact, sometimes I think it's just better to drop verbal cues altogether when you're working in behavioral terms. If you're doing specific tricks, then they need to have the right words. But when we're talking about changing a dog's behavior, it's much better actually to focus on the response to the situation and your behavior and the sequences that go around that. So for example, if you want the dog to sit when you're answering the door, it won't make a huge amount of difference whether you're using the word sit nice or wait. Your dog is not really going to probably worry too much about the difference of those. What's more important is the process of consistently asking your dog to sit and making sure they continually do it the whole time you're answering the door. Dogs are very tuned into our body language and the behavior that is expected in certain situations. Dogs like protocols. So for example, the front door protocol goes, doorbell rings, we walk calmly to the door, dog goes to sitting spot, wait for the sit, answer the door, release from the sit. It's better to teach him that rather than focus on which word you're trying to use to get him to sit. Because once he's learnt the protocol, he'll just do it by himself, and then it won't matter who is answering the door with him. So if you've got 4 people in your house, and one of you saying wait, one of you saying sit nice, the other one's going sit, 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 the other one's doing something else. In this scenario, we've taught him a protocol. The doorbell is the trigger that kicks it all off. So as soon as he hears the doorbell go, he engages that protocol and starts doing those things, regardless of who actually is answering the door, because it was the doorbell trigger that set the whole process in motion, not you and the word that you're using. So this means that you can concentrate on that training. You can drill those, you can practice those sessions. 5 is the magic number. I think you should do 5 of everything in a row. So you can practice answering the doorbell, knock on the door yourself, ring your doorbell yourself, and drill that protocol over and over and over and over again. So your dog becomes really instinctive about what to do when the doorbell goes. This is another way of getting around an inconsistent approach from everybody in your family. The same goes with the lead. If your dog is just trying to get to the dog park quicker, he's trying to get to the sniff quicker, he's trying to get to the other dog quicker, you teach them that the fastest way to do that is either going to be pulling or walking calmly. That's more important than the words you use. When your dog learns that pulling on the lead gets him there faster, he's going to do that. When he learns that walking on a loose lead gets him there faster, he's going to do that. When you've drilled that into him again over and over and over again through practice, it becomes instinctive. And then as long as the other people are doing the same thing, they'll get the same results. So basically, sometimes it's just better to do things yourself. When your dog is in a good habit, then other people can join in with the training and they'll get faster results because they're more likely to stick with it. When you are doing training and you want to find some inconsistency that works, use different tools, like we discussed with different harnesses for different types of training. The guide dog learns different behaviors for different types of harness, and your dog can learn that too. So we're teaching them that the rule applies to the tool and not necessarily the person that's holding the lead. So you'll be able to speed up your training and your efforts. Will start to count for much, much more. This is brilliant for when others can't or won't help you. They can use the long lead, do what you want harness, and you can use the short lead, walk nicely to heel harness, and your dog will just learn those 2 different behaviors. Teach situational responses rather than cues and words, so it doesn't matter who's in charge of the situation at the time, just like we did with the doorbell. The doorbell's the trigger. Then he knows what to do as soon as the doorbell goes, so it doesn't matter who's with him. Hopefully there's some tips in there that's helped you. I'd love to know how you're getting on and what your challenge is. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now. Bye-bye.